Jim Ward, Executive Director for Matthew 25. Welcome to Signature Required.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here.
We're excited to have you today. For anyone that's trying to figure out what Matthew 25 is, most people probably won't know. They might try to pull some scriptural reference and say, I cannot recall from Bible study what Matthew 25 is. So maybe you can tell us what Matthew 25 is all about.
Yes, and for people who go to the Bible and start to look it up, there's a lot in Matthew 25.
I did this last night.
And as I tell people, we're not dealing with the separating the sheep and the goats. That is not what we're doing. But we take our inspiration from the portion where Jesus is saying, if you do this for the least of these, you've done it for me. And the sections where, when I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. I was naked and you clothed me. I was basically homeless and you gave me shelter. I was a stranger and you invited me in. And that is written on the walls of several places around our facility. I was a stranger and you invited me in. And that is the inspiration that the founders took. We were founded here in Nashville by volunteers from two separate congregations, First Presbyterian Church and Christ Cathedral downtown. And 1986, they were like, we need to do something for homeless men, working poor, and it has grown from there, from being in the basement of a church to now being in we have 2 floors of a facility here in Nashville, in the Vine Hill area, which started out a few years ago as a long time. It was, quote, a low-income area of town. We had subsidized housing. I got there at about the time they broke ground for the soccer stadium, so I managed to spend 2 years looking out my window, watching it go up. And Nashville's an interesting place. I have $600,000 homes across the street from our homeless shelter. So,
you know, your role in preparing for this, you got started in February of 2020.
I did.
And people like you are some of my favorite people to interview, because those that started in the immediate days preceding the pandemic, whether it's a business, a new job, I just kind of feel like perhaps you were put into place for such a time as this, like your unique leadership was necessary, or you're just incredibly unlucky and you deserve immense punishment to be put in right 30 days before the pandemic. So which one of those two is it?
I don't think it was a punishment, although I actually used that exact word talking to a friend of mine, and it's like, so she's like, God has a plan for you, and I said, or there's some discipline going on that I need to learn. When I came, they needed an interim director. The former executive director had left to start a church and move on. And he was someone who had worked for me for years before in a different organization. So at the time, I was doing some consulting work. He said, I want to recommend you to my board to be the interim executive director. And I said, okay, this sounds good. I'm in between the consulting places that I needed. And so I came and talked to the board. We agreed to, I believe it was 4 months until we can get some things in place. And almost immediately from the time I got there, they had a little problem. It was really a technical problem with some funding sources that they had. So suddenly it's like, oh yeah, by the way, we don't have any money in the bank. And we...
By the way.
That's a really
we got a little reserve over here. And so, and those were just some, really, as I said, some technical things. It took us about 30 days to find that and to get it back. But as an organization, have been living pretty much most of it's a very small nonprofit. And so to say that we live fairly hand to mouth is pretty, I know, getting to a place where, okay, I know where next month's payroll's coming from. I know where next month's food costs are coming from. Okay. I can pay rent on time. They pretty well moved along. But at the same time, February 4th is the day I walked in, and nobody had whispered the word COVID.
Yeah.
Didn't know anything about it. My wife was the first person a couple of weeks in. She had read something, people were starting to talk about stuff, and and it was popping up on the news and things of that nature. And she's like, I think this may be something, and I'm always the dismissive one. I'm like, that is, that's just that's
Flash
not
in the
gonna-
pan.
Yeah.
Flash in the pan, not going to happen. And by mid-March, we were in the throes of it, and that meant everything from working with the Veterans Administration, which is we partner with them in a lot of what we do, working with homeless veterans. That we were just making, I don't want to say making rules up as we go along, but we were making rules up as we were going along. We were tweaking the protocols, working on this, and it was like we need to go to single occupancy rooms. All of the veterans now can't come to the VA for their appointments. They need to be virtual. We as an organization, we had no Wi-Fi beyond 20 feet from the modem that was sitting in the middle of the admin section. I'm like, I can't put somebody on a video call. Things like that. We were trying to crawl through the ceiling and drop another hotspot. Maybe we can pick up some more Wi-Fi in the lunchroom and things of that nature. So we weren't technically prepared. We were still doing everything on paper. So we really didn't. My social workers, which they are the heart of the program in terms of working daily to day with the guys, we didn't even have laptops. They were tied to their desk.
Wow.
So working from home became very problematic to the degree that we could do that.
And maybe to thoroughly just understand the complexity of the issue, we first have to just really understand what Matthew 25's mission is. So maybe just take us to that and help us understand what the mission is, because I think the story that you just told there is uniquely appreciated amongst the backdrop of what you do and the housing you provide in your mission.
So Matthew 25 is what is known as what we call a transitional housing program. So we have at max capacity on our transitional housing program, 49 beds that we can bring 49 homeless men into. About 80% of those are veterans. We are in that space pretty heavily in terms of the population that we serve. And they are double occupancy rooms. You come in, you are assigned a social worker. We develop a goal plan, a service plan. The goal is ultimately to get a person into addiction recovery, if that's what's needed, to get them employed if they're employable, and ultimately to leave our place with the key in their pocket to their own place. And that's how we know we've been really successful.
Love that.
And we have a wall at Matthew 25 with pictures of the guys holding the big real estate key. I found the one where we're moving guys out, and they're going to apartments. They're going to housing. And that's the end goal, if you will. And while there, as to the mission, we're working with them spiritually. We're trying to build them up. We're trying to keep them and move them onto a path of basically self-sufficiency and stability. And some of them have been homeless for a short time, and some of them have been chronically homeless. They've been in and out of shelters like ours for years, or they had a place and they lost it. And all of the stories that you can imagine, we have had examples of all of them. Either it's an addiction problem, it's my addiction problem, or we have an elderly gentleman recently who lost his home in the most stereotypical today way. His house was sold. He was living there with 2 or 3 other people. The landlord sold it. You got to go. We're tearing it down in Nashville, and we're building 2 houses. And he had nowhere to go. So it's across the spectrum of the types of folks that we see. So we serve 3 meals a day, 365 days a year. They have a warm place in the winter, a cool place in the summer, and they work daily and weekly with on-site master's level social workers in developing their plans for getting housing. We're a sober living environment, so there's a lot of accountability involved in that, a lot of working with the men to sort of straighten up your behavior while you're here. And we have 2 levels of program. One we call service intensive, which is just what it sounds like. It's a basic level program, but their work is the same. Get them in, get them on a program. Ultimately, we start right off the bat. How are we going to get you housed? How are we going to keep you off the street? What is going to be necessary to do that? And then the other part of our program, which is growing for us, is called clinical treatment. And that is a more intensive program that we work with, and that is a minimum of 8 to 12 weeks commitment to 4-day-a-week group and individual therapy. So every week for that period of time, you are spending 3 to 4 hours every day in group therapy and individual therapy working on addiction recovery.
Radical change.
Radical change. And that is, and I say we're growing that. We currently partner with another mental health organization here in town. We bus the guys in a van over there every day. We leave the place at 8 o'clock in the morning. We pick them back up after lunch and bring them back to us. We want to bring that in-house, and so we're renovating a place in their facility to allow us to set up a situation where, a lot like your studio here, but it's where we'll have the classroom set up. We'll have everything we need. We'll hire our own licensed clinician. We'll be licensed by the state to make provision of this. And that way we can better control the curriculum, also better control the accountability for the men. We're watching you. You're in this program, and you're also here. And it will be a major radical step for us.
So I want to go back. It's really helpful to understand the mission. When we were talking just before this on the timing and everything as you came in, I could see the complexity of the program that you're running and the timing of that absolutely creating for you in that moment feelings of, what have I done? Like, this is not recoverable. I'm in a mess, and there's no way out of it. You've got changing funding problems. You've got changing compliance requirements coming down. You're in this whole new world, dealing with veterans and all of the complexity and challenges there. Did you have that moment of like, I don't know if I want to go forward, and if you did, how did you push through that?
I think I had those moments every day for about the first 6 months, probably a year, because it can be exhausting if you're, looking at nonprofits, any nonprofit, and particularly, one like ours, in sort of a business sense and an entrepreneurial sense, we're no necessarily different than the guy with the small business, and he's trying to make payroll next week, and I hope I sell enough here. I hope I've got that. That's where we were in terms of, cash flow was always a question, and it was just like the small businessman. I'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go, I don't really know what we're going to do here. I don't know how
I've had those
I'm
3
going
a.m.s.
I don't know how. It is Wednesday, payroll. I have to fund payroll Friday, and I have no idea how I'm going to do it. There was a lot of that.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of times when it was like, okay, I think it'd just be easier to just chunk this and find the next thing. But, I tend to just sort of put my head down sometimes and sort of power through it. And it was the kind of thing where it required, like I said, a lot of work from a lot of sources. I mean, I have a great local board that many of whom have been on the board for a good period of time, and they have put literally blood, sweat, tears, money into funding the program, helping to find the funding. And I think, I don't want to say COVID was a good thing, because it clearly wasn't, and I don't know that we handled everything the right way. I don't know that the VA handled everything the right way, but it was new. We'd never done this before, at least no time in the past 100 years. So, but it did become a catalyst for us to move to change a lot of things. I mean, it became very critical infrastructure, which is what I started with in terms of we have to be prepared not only for the next thing, hope there's never another next thing, but how do we upgrade the facilities? And now and into the program, we were able to say, okay, we have Wi-Fi now. We had to go out and find the money to spend the money to fix these problems, but I can now set a veteran up, and we do all the time with, you have an individual place where you can go in your room and you can video conference with whomever, whether it's the doctor, whether it's a social worker at the VA, whether it's a family call, whatever. We've upgraded. We were able to upgrade our computer facilities for the veterans. So we have a facility now where they have better computers than anybody in the than our staff does, that are sitting there ready for them to go online, do what they need to do, whether that's resumes, whether that's emails, whether that's, getting in touch with the, landlords and things of that nature. They can do that. They can also play games. We have to kind of limit that, but it's like, you've been playing World of Warcraft for 3 hours and someone else needs the facility. But so I say that it was a catalyst for us to make a lot of changes. And how do we do things, differently? How can we do things better and upgrade what we have? Change the way everything from all of our record keeping, we're now completely electronic.
Yeah.
Right.
Can you take a step back, and when we hear about the mission of Matthew 25 being predominantly veterans focused, let's zoom out and realize that part of the nationwide narrative is what is going on with our veterans, the suicide rate, the tragedy that is going on for veterans, for our country that have fought for the very things that we enjoy on a daily basis and sometimes take for granted. What in the world is happening with our veterans that Matthew 25 is even needed to begin with? Because part of when I hear your mission, it's that, was this done in response to a significant veteran crisis that you're having such a concentration of veterans, or was it the other way around, that veterans are just uniquely in this spot more than most? But for someone that is living and breathing this every day, can you help us have a lens into what in the world is happening?
So I don't think it is you can say, okay, you're a veteran, so it's guaranteed that you're going to have a problem. Now, what we do know statistically is veterans are 2 times as likely to become homeless as the rest of us, the average population. That's to say that they are overrepresented. The amount of people that are veterans are overrepresented based on the numbers in the homeless population. Statistically, right now, about 49 to 50% of the homeless veterans are Vietnam era veterans. So they're getting up in age, but that's, only about 4 to 5% right now, you could say, are Iraq war or in those levels.
That's a useful data point. Okay.
Now, about 79% of homeless veterans have a substance abuse problem.
Okay.
That is again a statistic that's pretty solid, and in the 40% of them also have a diagnosed mental health issue. So PTSD, obviously everybody wants to go to that, and that is, I would back up and say there are a lot of different things that are traumatic, and trauma itself is one of the things that drives that. And the chicken and egg question, did I have trauma and I tried to compensate with drugs?
Yeah.
Or did I start with drugs, and some people do, and then that led to trauma. But using substance abuse is really a major driving cause. And if you add to that, as I said, mental health issues, it just makes for a serious issue. Now, there are studies out there that say just because someone was in combat does not mean that they, have PTSD for that matter, much less that it leads them. The ones that are combat, that percentage doesn't seem to be, well, all of the homeless veterans had some really tough combat experiences. Doesn't seem to be the question. So
there's another threat.
It has to, and I think broader, what happens when you leave the military, 89% of homeless veterans are honorably discharged. So again, it's not the
troubled.
It's not the troubled. It's 89% of them have been honorably discharged. So the question becomes, okay, so civilian life is different and difficult. And we see that for guys that have been in a long time, and then literally you do come out and there is absolutely no one telling you what to do, where to be, where to go. And these are smart and intelligent people just like the rest of us, but it's like my world is different.
Yeah.
I don't know how to navigate this world. And I think that there's a higher percentage of veterans that fall into that category after they get out.
Yeah. And it's you can't appreciate it either. So my husband spent a decade in the Marine Corps, so this is a topic that hits close for us in terms of some of the experiences we've been through. But I'll tell one story that I'll never forget. He was talking about when he transitioned out of the Marines, he took a job. He was living in D.C. And took a job in D.C. and was walking to work one day, and so he's in a corporate job at this point, and so he's wearing a full suit, and said he was standing at a crosswalk waiting for the light to change. And he was standing there and he got that feeling that you get when it's like something's off, like everybody's looking at me, something's happening, I don't know what's going on. And it took him a minute to figure it out, but he said he looked around and realized that everybody else was under an umbrella and he was in a full suit and it was just pouring torrential rain. And he's like, everyone's looking at me. He's like, I'm headed to this big meeting. And I had a real like, Dorothy, you're not in Kansas anymore moment, because I would, rain would never stop me for the last decade of my life. I'd be working and running and working out and standing in line and, and it's just like life is different for them. They're different. And I've got some adjusting to do, but it's like, you don't realize those little daily moments that are different for us that haven't experienced it. But I want to go back to the substance abuse piece and understand that a little bit from, obviously, there's a drug crisis happening right now, in America. But when you think about what you're seeing pattern-wise, obviously fentanyl is a new problem, but the drug crisis is not a new problem. And so what are you seeing as kind of the common gateway when we talk about substance abuse? Like, is this alcoholism? Is it weed? Is it, like hard prescription drugs? Like, where is the path that's creating such an 80% substance abuse problem in the candidates you're dealing with?
Right. Well, the last thing that you said, we don't see a tremendous amount of prescription drug abuse. Now, there's going to be some of that. And again, to me, we now know the stories. We've swung the pendulum back and forth on the opioid crisis. So, we'll say we overprescribe that, and then we turn that spigot off and said to someone who's been on Oxy or Vicodin or something along those lines for 10 years as a pain management, you can't have that anymore. We're gonna roll that back. At that point, you do have some people who sought out other things, but generally, the same drugs are always there. When we test for drugs, and we do regularly, so you are subject to regular tests, you're subject to random tests, you're subject to test on suspicion. And for us, coming back with a positive test does not mean, well, okay, you violated the rules, you're out of here. It means we're going to work with you some more. We're going to put you on a behavior plan. We're going to try to work with you as best we can to become clean and stay sober. But the drugs are common. They're the meth, the cocaine, the benzos. Those are the things that we see pop all the time. The fentanyl pops, marijuana pops. I don't know that I would say that we necessarily see. I would not go out and go, this is the gateway drug for that. I just don't know. And there are some that are your typical, I don't do drugs, I drink.
Yeah.
And we have some of those. I never do drugs, but I drink. And alcoholism is age old in terms, and it was the start, if you will, of the baseline idea for all the 12-step programs is beginning this process. And we have 3 or 4 of those groups going a week at our place. So fentanyl is that monster that is out there now. And our case managers are working with these guys, and they'll come back, well, you tested positive for this. and fentanyl. And I don't do fentanyl. I'm like, but you can't. Number one, it tested positive for it. Number two, it's really hard to say today that you don't do fentanyl, whether you meant to or not.
Yeah.
Nobody has a very good, clean, certified clean dealer on the street. It's just not happening. And they are cutting things on purpose, people with no real chemical ability. So how much does this batch of whatever have? And we see it in, you see news stories I read, getting into this space, I've started following a lot of different things. And, you have people, you hear the story of the 21-year-old girl who died from a pill that she got from her friend, and it was fentanyl laced. And she just meant to take an upper or a party pill, and it turned out to be a fentanyl pill. So as we work with these guys, we're like, you don't know what's in there, but this is clearly in there. And we've had a couple of times, everybody in our staff, and we also have regular training of the residents themselves for opioid overdose training. So everybody, I carry Narcan now. I've learned one of the things that's changed is I need a couple of Narcan kits in my car as I'm riding around, because I have come across someone laid out in a Walmart parking lot. And so you just know to look for that sort of stuff these days. But we've had a couple of instances, over the past 4 years where, one of our staff has had to, fortunately, we caught it and was able to use Narcan, and they came back up. And even then, they're like, I didn't use fentanyl, I didn't use heroin. And like, this only works on opioid overdose. So the fact that you're now back means you took it whether you meant to or not. So it's that thing that's just, it's almost like a gremlin that's just out there, and it's going to be in things that they didn't anticipate. They didn't mean to, but it's still there. So
can you talk a little bit about just mechanically how someone finds Matthew 25? If I'm a veteran, is it family that's helping me get connected? Are you interacting with generally veterans the first time? And just walk me through what a week or two of onboarding looks like. Are you having to turn people away? Just some of the mechanics of how Matthew 25 works.
So we are a referral-based organization, and that sounds like we're gatekeeping, but we tend to get referrals from other social service agencies. So we are in communication and partnership with the other ones in the Nashville space. We have Room in the Inn, we have Operation Stand Down, we have organizations like that. We work with the Rescue Mission, which is the massive overnight. They have hundreds a day there. So we'll get referrals from all of those people that we have so and so who would be a good fit for your program, or they're coming off of this and they need housing. Veterans primarily, we work through the VA's Office of Homeless Services. So they are right there on the VA campus. We have a liaison. All of us who deal in the space and have a VA liaison who we communicate with on a daily basis. So we're talking about the cases. We're talking about the gentleman daily, really, with our liaison in terms of information passed back and forth and what's needed and getting them VA healthcare. Some of them come in and it's a process of you don't have anything. By that I mean you don't have a primary care physician. You don't have any sort of medical plan. You don't have anything like that. So we start with referrals. You can go online and fill out an application. Social workers do this all the time. That goes directly to our intake coordinator, and she begins the process of contacting the veteran, contacting the VA, contacting the social worker, and bringing the process in of agreeing to come in. Right now, as I said, today I think went home last night and we had one bed open of the 49. So we're tend to deal right now with a wait list. So we're constantly kind of working through that. And that's where we also partner with the other agencies in town that also work in the veteran space and in terms of can we get this person into their program, or can we? It's not to make light of it. It's almost like a trading card thing. We all have got, and we've fortunately now have a singular application process. So we all fill out the same application. So we all get the same data. They work with their liaisons. We work with ours in terms of getting them moved into the program. And the program, the VA has several different programs. We participate in one called Grant Per Diem, and it is, we get a set amount from the VA to support an individual per day. So they have to be there today, sleep there tonight, and then we'll apply for funding. It's retroactive, so it's like, as I said, we spend March money.
Yeah.
And then in April, they will send us so much back. We tend to, accounting is everything, and we get about 60% of the funds we need for the veterans through the VA. We have to basically raise the other 40. So we're out there trying to bring in grants, trying to bring in major gifts and things of that nature to help support the program.
Is the VA aware of that the funding that they provide is insufficient in order to take care of somebody? Is that the design of the program, or would the VA, if here, say, this should be enough in order to
I think it's the design of the program. I think there is it's set way up in Washington. Our local VA has nothing to do with
For sure.
the per diem rate.
Sure.
So that rate is set. It has gone up significantly. It went up skyrocketing at the beginning of the COVID crisis. They were like, okay, so as I said, there's a set rate. So it is set at a maximum rate per day, and it varies from state to state. So they call it the state max. Okay, I would imagine that the per diem rate in New York City is set much higher than ours is, as it probably should be. But during COVID, you could go up to 1.5 times or 2 times the max rate.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
But you still have to put together it's not just here's money. So you have to show how you're spending the money, and then you have to prove after the fact that you did spend the money the way that you do. But it is not hard for us to say we spent 100% of what you brought in.
Have those funds come down now since COVID? Like, has that receded from the double, the
Yes,
max
so
rate?
the double, you can apply to double is long gone. Everything changed May 11th of 2023 was we signed, the COVID is over. So that was when COVID emergency stopped being declared by the administration, by all of the different departments. So that automatically changed. So the rates, again, they fluctuate every year, and they're set on a fiscal year basis. Sometimes they go up, and then you can reapply for a different rate. There's a lot of accounting that goes into saying, okay, this is how we're going to spend this money. And they clearly don't want you to just, we're on national calls every month with the national VA that, and there's always here's an educational section of the call, and here's this, and here's finance is going to come on, the Office of Business Management. Make sure you're doing this, and make sure you don't do that. So.
Yeah, entrepreneurially, I appreciate you letting me go into the kind of economic side of it, because that's my heart language, and what I feel like starts to peel back the layer of how to at least try to solve for whatever is going on here. So when you think about the federal support that you receive from the VA, is there state support specific to Tennessee that is available, that is critical, and does that contrast with other states of saying, well, there's some states that really do come alongside the VA and supplement it? How do you think about Tennessee specifically in the support you receive?
There are no programs in Tennessee that specifically address daily basis kinds of work. Now,
Wow.
the state has quite a few programs aimed in the direction of housing first. Obviously, we get our guys, if they're not VA healthcare eligible, we have to work them into the TennCare program. Those kinds of things. There are a lot of programs aimed at as I said, providing housing and helping in that regard. And there are grants out there. We just never had a way to necessarily qualify for them because we're transitional housing. Our goal is to get you in here and then out of here into your actual house. So primarily we are, as I said, federal grant funded, and then we raise the rest of it.
So just to make sure I understand that, so you're saying essentially there's more programs available for long-term housing support than there are for the transitional programs?
Right. That is what they're aimed at. Now we're fortunate to try to partner with pretty much everybody that's out there doing the things that they do in their space. Second Harvest Food Bank is one of them. We're a purchasing agency of Second Harvest. So we go over there once a week, and we can buy food at a much reduced rate. And then they also have some things that we can get from them. So we're a donor; they donate to us, and so we're able to manage those things that well. So, and a lot of that, but most of the time, our most expensive, we're just like any other. You mentioned a business. What's your biggest line item? Salary, taxes, and benefits. I mean, that is our program. And as I always tell people, I've got, 5 or 6 social workers here. They are the program. They are the ones who are in the trenches with these guys on a daily basis. They are the ones doing housing navigation. They are the ones developing the care plans and holding these guys accountable. So they need to be paid, and I don't pay them enough. But that's our number 2 cost is food. So it is, if you can imagine right now, if I'm feeding 49 guys in our transitional housing program, we also have a second program called Progressive Housing, which is a income-based rental program. So we do have 17 apartments in our building that we can rent back on an income base. But they still have an on-site social worker that works with them every week. And that program is for people who are not quite ready or not quite able. They may have more evictions that they need to pay off. They may be waiting out felony terms. There's a lot of different things for reasons that people can't rent here. So at any given day, we have 16 or 17 guys, and we just call it the third floor program because that's where it is, but it's progressive housing, and they're up there. So we also allow them to participate in the meal plan. So just to say, I've got, on any evening, I'm feeding probably 60 guys, 3 meals a day, 365 days a year. So that adds up, and it doesn't cost me any less to buy milk than it does the average family. So
I have a couple rapid fire questions
Sure.
just to try to understand the program. So question 1 is what's the average time a guy spends in the program to get through the transition?
Right. So our average right now is about 6 months. The average time a person is at Matthew 25 is about 6 months. We have some guys that come in and they're very successful very quickly.
Yeah.
I have a couple of gentlemen who've been here going on 400 days. So
Meaning that by the end of that 6 months, they are in a place of their own. They've got the key, like you talked about, and
Right.
and they're in that capacity self-sufficient. So
that is the goal.
that's the goal. Yeah. So harsh reality, right? Because it's a tough situation. What is the long-term success rate of that? Like how many of these guys are we seeing come back versus, hey, we got them through it and now they're.
I would say obviously recidivism is just one of the things that we look at. I've been there 4 years now. My interim period is really stretched out. And in that 4 years, I've probably seen 3 or 4 guys that are back.
Okay.
Okay,
Wow.
so why don't we have Mr. So-and-so back? But
That's hardly any, though.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
that's incredible.
back to us. So I would say, one of the things that we do now is I keep saying we've added programs, but we have added another one called an alumni program, which we now have a social worker whose job it is to basically provide programming for guys after they leave our program and get into housing. And that may mean everything from she works with them on budgeting. We're delivering food bags because they may get over there and they're still trying to live off of $500 a month disability income or something like that. That's impossible. So we're, always working on that, trying to help them get furnishings, but also helping to build some community because we have some guys, a guy's been here 6 months and we've had him tell us, suddenly I'm here and now I see the same people every day. I have community, I'm eating dinner, and then I get housing.
And I'm alone.
And I'm alone. And I'm just stuck over there alone. And so one of the things that our alumni program is trying to do is bringing those guys back. And we're doing simple things. I mean, a Chick-fil-A lunch for 10 guys, or she'll go around and pick those up who need to be picked up. Last week, she took 5 or 6 guys to Zanies.
Yeah.
They had never been to anything like that, And again, but the long-term goal is, she runs a rent-wise program. How do you budget? How do you pay? Trying to keep that out. Now, I will say, using a national statistic, there has been a push every year by the National VA to house. In 2022, it was 36,000, I believe, homeless veterans. In 2023, it was 40,000 homeless veterans. Interesting thing, in 2022, they did that. We housed 38,000 homeless veterans. Homeless veterans increased by 7%. So it's like you're filling the pool back up from the bottom, even though we're getting guys into housing. And if they said there are 65 to 70,000 known homeless veterans this year, and you housed 40,000 of them, that should only leave 2025, and it just unfortunately hasn't worked that way yet. Of the ones, so the new push this year, there's a new goal, 41,000, I believe it is, but there's also a goal of reducing the recidivism. So what we found was about 5% of those that were placed into housing. So there's kind of that. So we're not always successful as I can go back in 12 months and go, you're still here. So, and then everything's a metric. And everything's a metric with the VA, and we have a goal of keeping what we call our negative exits at below 20%. And so if I bring in 150 individuals this year, I'm trying to keep the ones that leave the program before success below 20%. And that can happen for a variety of reasons. They can just leave. Using the military term, we call it going AWOL. And next thing I know, they've just left. And we can't find them, and their family doesn't know where they are, and they've just, they've stepped out. Or we have some that just are so, they refuse the program, as we say, and you get to a point where we can't just put you up here so you can try to sneak in substances, or you're just not going to you're not making any progress. We're not. So we try to keep that below 20%, and we're pretty successful at doing that. But I would say probably, statistically, I think we're about like the national average. There's probably going to be 5 to 10% that we can go, they're homeless again.
Yeah.
So.
This may be too big of a question, but as we went through that series, what I wanted to get to the root of, to just understand, is I'm amazed at it's only 6 months on average to get them, not homeless, right? And somewhat self-sufficient. And I'm amazed at how low your recidivism rate is. So for me, when I hear that, I think what I'm looking for, trying, and I imagine we would all be asking, is when you think about those different programs and the things you're doing, obviously it's unique to everyone, and it's this problem for this person and this problem for this person, but are you able to kind of see that common trend of, like, if we can just get them through the substance abuse problem, or if we can just get them through the psychological issues, or if we can just teach them how to budget and how to transition into the real world? What is kind of some of that common thread that you would say is like, man, this is what's really moving the needle for these guys and making the difference?
I think I don't know that there's a single thing, and I think it's all of the above. I think it's a concept of we're not doing anything for these men. that they have to at a point agree. And I have some guys. I've had a guy sit across on my desk, and he's a homeowner now. I mean, he's moved through our program, second floor, third floor, progressive housing program. Left. Not only did he leave with a key, he left owning a home. He had bought a house out in Ashland City. But he said Matthew 25 saved my life, and because we finally had people who went, we're going to hold you accountable to some behaviors here that nobody has for a very, very long time. But they still have to get to that place where they're willing to be held accountable. Yeah. And one of my board members, I was just frustrated. You talk about the frustration. I'm like, it feels like there are times when I have social workers who are sitting across the desk from these guys, meeting with them, and I can almost hear them going, will you let me help you?
Yeah.
Will you let me help you? And sometimes the answer is no.
It's kind of Jesus by the pool of Bethesda.
That is exactly my board member. I'm doing this complaint, and he tells that story, and he goes, if you've ever read it this way, and he was like, the question of, the weird question Jesus asks is, do you want to be well?
Yeah. It's an incredible story.
And it's like, maybe.
A lot of people. Yeah, there's a lot of people that wrestle with that to say there is a commitment that you cannot make someone get well. They have to want it. They have to have that desire for radical change.
Yep.
I have two questions on that. This is something I'm curious about twofold, and my husband and I have talked about this a lot, is that one of the things kind of well, actually, let me ask a question first. Do you see any consistency across the branches or patterns? Is it across all branches, the groups that you're dealing with, or do you see any particular branches where you have a higher?
Oh, I would get in trouble with that. I think it's across all branches. And this is off the top of my bald head. I probably see less Air Force than anything. Okay. But in general, we'll have a majority are straight Army, because that's frankly the majority, the numbers.
Numbers, yeah.
So I think it's just a numbers game that way. I've had people. You tell stories that, what did you do? I was on a submarine, which to me is just like, well, that's just the most unbelievable thing in all, and so.
Yeah. So here's my question. So when you think about what y'all are talking about, you want to get well, and this ideology, one of the things that comes to my mind in thinking about these guys' transition and things my husband and I have talked about is there's an element of once they've, served their country and the kind of the mentality they have to take on to do the work that they're doing and live that life, to come out of it, there's a loss of significance that's going to be really hard to ever replace or refill of what you're doing being really meaningful and, that identity. So I'm curious, when I hear you talk about, getting these guys into community and having these social workers really engage with them, I wonder how often it is kind of having that connection of someone that really cares and making them feel like, you are loved and you are supported, and giving them a reason to want to get well, or some sort of hope or optimism on the other side that there's something better waiting. And I think about it with regards to the high, like, divorce rates, right, that you see for military. And I wonder, too, for a lot of the guys that you guys treat, how many of them, are estranged from spouses, children, family. Is that a common theme? Is that something that comes out a lot? Or?
That is a very common theme. I mean, we have guys who are, and sometimes they're like, I'm homeless. I have a job. I've got massive alimony payments, or I've got massive child support payments, or I'm behind this much. And again, you can't get housing if you've got these 3 different judgments against you right now. It's just very difficult to do. I think it's really a statistic I've not sat down and looked at, but a significant, if not the majority of our guys, are divorced. We almost never have someone who's there and currently married, or currently even in a partnership relationship. And we have a few, and then sometimes that's a problem. I can hear her stop going back over
Yeah.
to her place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That she's already got the restraining order against you,
Yeah.
but she says you can come.
Yeah.
But then it's going to blow up again. Stop
Yep.
doing that. And it's so those kinds of interpersonal things are pretty common as well. And for a lot of our guys, here in Nashville, the issues are we and it's true, there is a lack of affordable housing, however you want to define that. And I got, not only did I get to Matthew 25 right before someone mentioned the word COVID, also across the street from our facility is this beautiful soccer stadium that I got to watch them break ground and see the superstructure come up and all of that. I have several $650,000 homes across the street from our place.
Yeah.
So that's to say that there's just less and less of definable, affordable housing. We work a lot with two different programs. One is housing and urban development, and the other is the Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing. So we just call it HUD-VASH. And there are, again, income limits before you get subsidized housing. That wait period then can be quite significant. So we get them in the process, we get them in the cycle, we get them approved. Then finding an apartment that's suitable to them and that we can get them in, that takes some time. And in that regard, we've had some people waiting months to get a place, and they're frustrated. They're here, they're in the recovery program, they've got a job, they just can't get into the housing they want. And then if you have those, and we have a few that make good money, they're skilled labor, they're working in places, they're making good money, they're putting it in the bank. We have a savings program, we try to help monitor that. They don't qualify for any kind of subsidized housing. So now you're looking at market rate. And where are we going to find you some market rate as a single individual, maybe no car, that sort of thing in Nashville. So there, all of those things come into play when we're trying to get guys even moving through the process.
Mm-hmm.
So me as a business entrepreneur, I can't help but hear this and say, how can I help? How can we fix? So let me put a business consultant hat on for 1 second and just ask you, because when I look at a business, sometimes, as with every nonprofit, I say, how do you increase revenue? Which for you is going to be donations, since you can't control what you get from the VA or other subsidies. But one of the other sides is assessing cost and say, well, how do we eliminate cost? Because that can serve the same function. If I can cut my costs, then my dollar goes further. And something that's stuck in my head since you mentioned it is about your food costs, saying that I think you said it was the second largest cost that you have.
After salary, taxes, and benefits, it is.
So help me understand that, because when I think about food costs, which I imagine is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more for you, it seems as though there's more infrastructure in the Middle Tennessee community around making food available for those that would otherwise not have it. Now, food pantries, you mentioned Second Harvest. So the concept of your having to pay for food is something that I'm trying to wrestle with as perhaps a way to be able to help an organization like yours. So have you ever had any luck with a restaurateur in Nashville that may not be able to help 365 days a year for 3 meals, but they may say, you know what, we can do eggs like breakfast, we got it. Walk me through some of that.
So to say, well, I would say we have high food costs in terms of the percentage of our budget and that sort of thing, but we don't, fortunately, also have to buy 100% of everything that we serve. So we partner with several restaurants in town. So we have 3 weekly runs that we go and pick up food from Papa John's, Starbucks. We get big donation from Whole Foods
Okay.
every week. So we bring in. So the thing is, we have one of our guys. I don't remember who it was. Made a statement one time about if you come to Matthew 25, you will gain the Matthew 25.
Well,
Because
Papa John's, I get that.
we're going to
Yeah.
serve you food, and there's never a day where you can't go into the lunchroom. And there's there's the pastries and the this and the that and the snacks and the things of that nature available. So lunch is usually a lot of Papa John's, and sandwiches and soups and things of that nature. Our breakfasts are pretty continental, I'll be honest, because most of the time they're served out at 5:30, 6 in the morning. We got working guys that got to get up and get going and that sort of thing. Dinners are fully prepared usually, so we employ a cook full-time that works and prepares the lunch and dinner menus and works things up for prep on the weekends. We also partner with a couple of different organizations. We have a caterer. We Musically Fed is a organization where we get a lot of things. We just got all of the leftover green room food from the Nicki Minaj concert.
Okay.
And usually that is high-end kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so the next thing you know, our guys have got the vegan option, and they've got the fancy chicken, and they've got the, the shrimp and grits and the whole 9 yards. So Musically Fed is an organization that we can get things through, and that's usually during the concert season. We'll next thing you know, they'll show up on Sunday evening after the thing. We also work with a group out of Virginia called Mercy Chefs, and that is a group of chefs and entrepreneurs who decided to do just that. We can provide meals, we can provide foodstuffs, and we now can go to them, and they will bring us several loads every week of pre-prepared things, and then we can also order up. So they're able to give us a meat, 3 vegetables, a roll, and a dessert for $3.
Wow. Okay.
That
So
they deliver. So we do work with a lot of those kinds of organizations to try to keep the costs down.
So it sounds like you've got a lot of inputs from different ways, but even amongst all those examples that you gave, would you say that a third of your food is free and you're having to pay for 2/3? What is the ratio? Because what I hear in that is,
I would say probably maybe 15%, 20% of our food is free, and we pay for the rest.
that's
So
interesting, because I wonder, and part of what I hope is that people listening to this, I hear 3 major brands that you've talked about: Papa John's, Starbucks, Whole Foods, clearly nationwide brands. What I don't hear immediately in there are local brands, groups that are right outside, literally your front door, that may have a heart uniquely for veterans and for your cause. That, at least from what I hear, could be of enormous benefit to you to just help try to move that 15% of free food up to 30. I mean, how big of a difference would that make?
that
in a
would. I
budget?
mean, any of those, and the thing is, we like to serve our guys. Someone would say they're probably a little heavily starchy, but you're not going to go hungry.
Yeah.
So we do, particularly for dinner, there's a lot of food prep that goes into that sort of thing. One of the things that we have worked at doing, and we've been moderately successful, is trying to convince everything from churches to families to companies and organizations to do what we call Sunday dinner. If we could have 52 Sunday dinners prepped and paid for, and we've had groups to do that, and you can do it in multiple ways. You can cook it, you can cater it in, you can come to our fully functional commercial kitchen and prepare meals for 60 people. And we also want those, when you do that, to come and serve the guys and sit down and have dinner with the guys and stuff like that. And so Sunday dinner at Matthew 25 has been one of the things that if we could just, and if you think about it, I mean, it's a percentage of 365 meals, but it's 52 weeks a year is the big, hairy, audacious goal, as you were to say. We're not buying that food. We're not prepping that food. Someone is coming in and doing that for us.
And because that's where I get passionate about this, is that the nationwide narrative is to say our government is failing our veterans. And that may be true. It likely is true in some respect, to say that it's clear the VA money is not adequate. It's clear that the transitional support is not where it needs to be. And some of that is way more complex than anyone like you or I could ever try and solve for. We're just trying to pick up the pieces along the way. But what I also hear is the opportunity for Tennessee to come as a state that says, you know what, we're going to let Illinois do what Illinois does, New York do what New York does. But here in Tennessee, we treat our veterans with respect. We come alongside them and pick them up from a place to help them pursue a life beyond their military service. And what becomes very tangible and real for me just starts off with like, hey, come bring a meal. And if you can't bring 52 meals, it is what it is, but come alongside us in a real and tangible way, because I feel like that experience of seeing what you're doing there with 49 beds will just change someone's whole worldview about looking into the eyes of somebody that has been willing to lay their life down for you, but now is in a place where they need help.
Right. And I think, I would say, as you mentioned, we're fortunate in Tennessee and with the VA that we have. You hear a lot, as you say, you hear a lot of stories about it just makes news, the terrible VA hospital, the terrible this. We have good VA healthcare here in Tennessee.
That's good to know.
We have a good office of homelessness. I mean, we have good folk, and they do throw, I know throw is the wrong word, but commit to millions and hundreds of millions of dollars towards veterans homelessness across the country. And, the goal being they're trying to address it with all of the different programs. It's the VA's program to say we're going to house 38,000 people.
Yeah.
We're going to house 40,000. Successful at doing it. Preventing the refill of the pool is a part of the, I don't think we've got a handle on what that is.
Why there's more. When you say refill the pool, you're talking why there's just continually
If you house
more.
this many, but then VA homelessness grew 7%.
Yeah.
They're coming in and filling back up the pool. It's not the same people.
Yeah.
We're not housing the same 38,000 next year as we did this year. So I think it's trying to figure out how that works and what you can do there. We're in that ground level space of going, and we all want to say really large. I think we want our words to say things like, our mission is to alleviate homelessness. Our mission is to end homelessness. We don't even pretend at Matthew 25 that that's our mission. We're going to do that one person at a time.
Yeah.
The broader perspective, we can't prevent it. We're trying to eliminate homelessness for this individual.
Yeah.
And move this individual through. And as why do you do it? Well, simple. Jesus asked us to.
Yeah.
We didn't say you had to fix everybody. It's like we're bringing this in right here, and just like everything else, just like any nonprofit really, but it just takes the same money to do what we do as it does to run a gas station or to buy the things of that nature. And we do try to keep, the food costs they've gone up. It's like, what is my legacy of my 4 years? It's been, we were spending this much and now we're spending this much. And part of that is if in 2020 we had got to where we had 20 guys, 18 guys on site, now we have 49 and another 17, and I got that many guys. That's just, that alone. Is plus the fact that the foods themselves have just, if you're going up 8% a year in real food costs, just the cost of the food, some things have come back down. We're not, just like everybody else, we're not paying the same for the eggs and the milk as we were in 2021. Oh my goodness! But I always like to look at, well, the rate of food inflation is down this year. Yes, it is. That's just saying it's not going up as much.
Even further. Yeah.
We've climbed to here, and we're not going back down, it doesn't appear. So
Yeah, well, that's really helpful, and it at least gives something tangible for the feeling that everybody has in hearing the story of just saying, how do I help? And there's clearly financial ways to be able to help. I think there's other creative ways to be able to help. All of it is needed. So maybe Annalee and I will wrap by each doing one more question to kind of bring us home. And
Yeah, I think when I think about this community in particular and working with veterans, I maybe to even just bring a little bit of levity to it, as you've interacted with these guys over the last 4 years, one thing I know about veterans is that, sometimes dark, but they have a sense of humor on them,
right.
to navigate these things. But I'd love to hear some of the stories of where you guys find the joy, the celebrations, maybe some of the wins, how any of those kind of victories you can share from the last 4 years.
Yeah, and I think, we have several. We have them every day and every week. As I said, if you come to our place, and you'll see the wall of pictures of all of our guys where we have taken the Polaroids and we put them up, and those are our most happy successes.
Powerful.
We have guys, not all of them, but we've now had. In my 4 years there, we've had 3 guys come through our program, and they've come in onto our transitional housing program. They moved up and graduated into our progressive housing program. So now they're renting an apartment from us, working that, still progressing forward. When they left signed on the dotted line as a homeowner.
Yeah.
And those are your ultimate successes. Now tell Wilt, well, that just means now you've got to mow your own grass, and you've got all those things that the rest of us have to put up with. But you're right. Most of their guys are, they have senses of humor. They can be dark. They can be quirky. They can be like, okay, we have a monthly resident meeting, and it is that we go through and we sort of tell them, maybe this is the problem of the month, guys. Y'all are not doing this or that or whatever. Because all of our guys have chores. Everybody's responsible for doing things, and we rotate them around and helping keep the place maintained. Because I don't have a staff of, 15. I don't have concierge housekeepers. And then we hand out awards for everything from most creative to the biggest one was the Mountain to Molehill Award every month. It's the person who's like, okay, I'm going to take this down instead of take this up. But then we have an open forum period of time there, and I'm always like, oh Lord, what are we going to talk about? But it's always interesting to see these guys who all have been in the military, and they almost always now stand up and go, y'all know, pointing to everybody else, all their fellow guys, we're not supposed to do this. We're not supposed to do that. Police your own, so they try to hold themselves accountable really well as well. So, and they're just, some are just, they're their own person. And then others are just always in the mix of everything. We have one guy right now who spends a lot of time, he's very talented, doing artwork. And so he's just always drawing and they're just hanging up everywhere. We're like, okay, Mr. Brown, we gotta build a portfolio at this point. I can't have them hanging everywhere.
That's great. Thank you.
maybe what I'd ask is, true to your brand, Matthew 25, there is a missional focus of caring for these men, but I imagine also bringing them to the Lord and having professions of faith. I think that would be a compelling narrative so that churchgoers that are hearing this program can also understand that there is something deeper going on here than giving them a key to their place and making sure they're fed. So can you just talk about that component of what that's looked like over the last 4 years? Yeah,
and we have a weekly Bible study that guys are invited to. We also do a regular worship service and service of communion on about every other Monday at Matthew 25. one of our staff members is actually an ordained minister. So we keep that moving, and most of our 12-step programs are basically spiritually based programs. Now, we're not, as a board now, we had a big discussion about this, and we're not necessarily an evangelical program. But you cannot come to our place. And if you want to come to a place where you're not going to hear about Jesus, you're not going to be talked to, you're not going to be invited to a Bible study, we're not for you. Because as we say, it's on the walls. It's why we do what we do. And we hope that our guys realize you're actually showing me the love of Christ this way. And that it's not as big as I think y'all had asked for a book that I read or things of that nature. One of the things that I just finished here was a book called Liturgy of the Ordinary, and a really big part of that is whatever you're doing is basically service to someone else if you pay attention to how you do it. And we hope that our guys feel that bubbling up, that we're not telling you you're homeless, you're addicted because you're a sinner. We're like, hey, that's true actually, and that's the same reason I have my problems and everybody else has their problems.
Yeah.
Here's some answers for how to help that.
Yeah.
And then the truth of the matter is, and this and I say this sometimes when I go to speak at churches, the concept that I'm going to get you in, you're going to get saved, and that's going to solve all of your problems is really totally untrue.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's it hasn't solved all of mine in the sense that, well, I no longer have that temptation. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that works, but oftentimes it's like, okay, so now you have someone who's in it with you.
It's a daily walk.
It is a daily walk, and that's kind of what we try to get across to our guys, that this is the way to do it. And the Bible studies are interesting because, right now they're in Romans. I mean, that's a pretty interesting way to spend a Wednesday evening with a bunch of homeless men, is doing a study in the book of Romans. So.
Yeah. Jim Ward, I respect the heck out of what you're doing, running a nonprofit like you are. You've got the chops to be a business guy in a for-profit world. You've clearly had to navigate a really tough COVID period and have brought an organization, having grown through a period that killed off many more nonprofits than it helped stabilize. And so the fact that you have pulled that through while serving the least of these, serving those that are forgotten, is something that certainly has our respect and admiration, and we really appreciate what you're doing for those that are sometimes forgotten here in Tennessee in particular.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me and getting the story out.
Absolutely. Thank you.